Howdy, folks. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. I am your host, Mighty Bjorn, and today for you, got a more general purpose tabletop gaming, role playing gaming video for you today. And that's because the video, even though it's going to be kind of targeted towards tiny spies, the information itself is going to be useful across the board. It doesn't matter if it's Dungeons and Dragons, Star Wars, Star Trek, or any of the tiny D6 systems. That this in general, this video is being made to help game masters. Um, so let's try and give you a standard of what's going on here before I really dive into the meat and the potatoes of the video. So I have been doing quite a bit of Tiny Spies recently, and I need to design another NPC, useful NPC for my Tiny Spies campaign. Understand that this Tiny Spies campaign is set in 1980. So the Cold War is still going on. Now, for those of you who don't know what Tiny Spies is, or that are just now becoming aware of its existence, it is a rules light spy game. It's kind of a spy action game. Think of like James Bond or Mission Impossible versus kind of like the more real world type spy stuff. But so the mission I am trying to set up is the spy, the hero, is going to be sneaking into Russia and trying to secure information about a new Soviet tank. Understand that this is would be important for the United States at the time because essentially they were constantly doing threat assessments on the Soviet Union and Soviet equipment, and this is something that they would want to know, especially because this is around the time frame 1980 is around the time frame of the M1 Abrams being developed and designed. So they would want to know the capabilities of this new tank. So realistically, the question comes down to, but how am I going to make this work? Well, essentially, it comes down to the best way to make it work, or at least in my mind, is to create a useful NPC. So that's actually what I'm going to discuss today is basically creating and designing a useful NPC. And I'm going to do this from essentially a step by step standpoint of how I do it. I don't know if this is how everyone does it. I'm not really sure if this is the best way to do it, but this is the way I do it. So the first place I start with is the very simple, basic stuff: name, sex, height, weight, hair color, eye color, etc. The very bare bones description. Um, and essentially, this all kind of goes together as kind of a grouped up type of thing, where you're going to have your name, you're going to have the description of the character itself, which in this case, because I'm kind of doing a more James Bond esque type of adventure, I'm essentially going to design the useful NPC to also be the Bond girl, if you will. So that's actually a part of the description in mind. Now, when it comes to the description itself, sometimes what I'll do is I will find a photo of what I want the character to roughly look like, or as close as I can, and then I will do a written description. But sometimes I will use visual aids as well. Visual aids are good, but I'm kind of the old school. A written description is good enough, especially if it's you. You can also get a little bit more detailed with a written description, such as tattoos or scars, things of that nature. Now, the next thing that's a part of this first grouping of stuff that needs to be thought about when designing a useful NPC is the background. What is their educational background, their work background, etc.? And even in some cases, such as Dungeons and Dragons, you might even want to think of the religious background. If it's, say, you're designing a cleric, that might be something that needs to be considered. As well as I said a bit ago, skills. Skills are important. So for this character, their skills is going to be geared towards being, well, their educational background is going to be geared towards being some type of mechanical or electrical engineer. I haven't fully decided yet. It will probably be a mechanical engineer. And then the skills will reflect that she is a mechanical engineer. Okay. So there's all that. Now, of course, it would be different if, say, you're designing a knight. Their background would be an upbringing of being a training, being a squire, and then finally becoming a knight. So but essentially the background is still the same, and of course, when they finally become a knight, their skills when designing the NPC would also reflect them being a knight. So it'd be more like combat paralysis skills. Now, with that being said, another thing that should be thrown out there too as a part of this is their job. Well, her job is essentially a weapons designer for the Soviet military. So there you go. There's that job. Of course, that would also be the knights, the healers, etc. Oh, every character is going to have useful NPC is going to have more than likely a useful job one way or another. Although I have in the past made a useful NPC that was a bum, which was interesting. Now, the next thing to cover, and I would say this is the next part, is what kind of possessions do they have? Of course, with a knight, he's going to have a horse, he's going to have saddle, weapons, armor, etc. Um, Maybe if it's a military officer, say a more modern military officer, he may have a pistol, obviously a military uniform, etc. For this woman, she'll pretty much have the clothes on her back, but she might also have access codes or key cards or just regular keys in general that would give the character access to what he needs to get the blueprints or at least photos of the blueprints. Now, of course, as a part of this, creating the NPC as well is going to be their goals. What goals do they have? Now, of course, say for your local tavern owner, maybe just be a successful tavern owner. For the knight, and maybe defend the kingdom and serve the king honorably. For this character, it's going to be something a bit different because at this point, we pretty well know that the Soviet Union was a bad place. A lot of people were locked up in the gulag. They built walls to keep people in instead of protecting their borders, etc. So the idea of maybe she's trading information to be a defector, so she could defect out of the Soviet Union and out of Russia makes perfect sense. A defection for a trade of information. Yeah, seems legit. And of course, that's the idea is that she's going to trade information and pretty much tell the player characters where to find the set blueprints for the new tank. So that way they could get photos of the tank itself and get the information for the tank and so on and so forth. And of course, the trade will be for a way out of the Soviet Union. So it works out perfectly. Now, for this adventure, that does work. Now, with that being said, the goals once again may change from character to character. Okay, so there's a lot of different goals out there to think about, and it's just going to vary from NPC you design to NPC you design, but it should be something that kind of fits within the parameter of what would work for the character or what would benefit the character the most. Because one thing to keep in mind is even if they are a useful, I want to say helpful NPC in this instance, if they are a helpful NPC, they're still going to have some kind of goals at play that works for them. May it be money related, fame related, whatever. So that is pretty much things to think about when making useful NPCs and what is going to make them useful to the players themselves. Of course, maybe the tavern owner is being used as a quest giver. That could be one form of useful NPC. Maybe they perform security or guard duties. Maybe it's a merchant, etc. So there's a lot of different types of useful NPCs you can make. Obviously, like I said, it's going to vary based on what kind of useful NPC you're making. This is just a very, very generalized guide of what I do to make my useful NPCs. And I would say the final step is going to be, where will the players find them? Now, of course, I haven't completely written up the adventure yet. I'm still kind of in the early planning stages and trying to get, how would you say, the players, the NPCs, if you will, all lined up. I kind of have an overarching goal, but I don't really have the whole picture. I'm still kind of working on that. But more than likely, the player characters will meet said Russian defector within Russia itself, and probably somewhere near the final objective, which is, well, one of the final objectives, which is getting the blueprints itself for the said tank. But anyway, folks, I'm going to wrap this video up at that. Hopefully, you all find it useful. Thank you very much for tuning in, and have yourself a wonderful day.